Hey everybody, I'm Roy Petitfils, author of What Teens Want You to Know, But Don't Tell You. And I'm starting a new video series based on my upcoming book, The Secret to Connecting with Teens. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be filled with real practical how-to content based around 5 precepts, 5 steps that I believe that we have got to practice in order to really connect with teens. And so the first one is be accepting. Practice radical acceptance. Because, for yourself, and I know for me, if I don't feel like you accept me, then I'm not going to be open to you influencing me, much less, connecting with me, right? So the first thing that I need to know is that you accept me. And acceptance is real powerful. And we communicate that in a bunch of different ways. And we're going to go over some of those today. But the first thing that we must understand when it comes to accepting, and a lot of folks tell me, parents will say, well, Roy, I just cannot accept the fact that my teen smokes marijuana. I just can't accept that. Or youth ministers are like, man, Roy, I just can't accept the fact that they're going into mass pierced up or dressed however they're dressed. I can't accept, the teachers will say, I can't accept the way that they talk to me. Pastors will say, I just cannot accept the fact that they're playing on their phones while they're in mass or while they're in church. And so the first thing I think that the most important thing we need to understand when it comes to acceptance is that acceptance is not condoning, right? To accept someone is not necessarily, does not have to be condoning their behavior, right? I work with teens all day long. I've worked with teens for the last 20 years. And I think one of the things that I do, things that I practice that has made me extremely effective in working with teens is that I convey acceptance immediately without necessarily condoning their behavior. Because if I communicated that I'm condoning everything you do, they might like me for a second, but they're not going to respect me, and they're certainly not going to allow me to influence them. So acceptance does not necessarily mean that I'm condoning their behavior, right? I'm accepting them. I'm accepting them as a person. I'm not necessarily saying it's okay for you to do that. And there's a way to do that. There's a way to communicate that, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But this is just a philosophical just belief that we've got to get over, that if I accept this person, I'm giving them permission to do whatever they want to do. And that's just not true. So that's the first principle. Acceptance does not mean condoning. Number 2 is accept yourself, right? It's hard to really accept someone else when we don't accept who we are. It's going to be really difficult to accept and convey love, especially unconditional acceptance, right, to young people, to teens especially, if we don't really accept who we are. And I believe there's 2 parts of that. One is that we have to accept our blessing and our gift. And if you've heard me speak before, I know you've heard these words come out of my mouth because it's my passion. It's my passion, right? We've got to know our gift. We have to first know our blessing. What is good about me? Because there's no way that I'm going to see the good in this teenager if I don't first see the good that is in me. How we see ourselves is how we see everything around us. And you may not agree with that, but in my very short 41 years of life on this earth, I have found that to be true. If I see myself as completely broken, then I will tend to see other people as completely broken. But if I can see the gift in me, and again, I know that's harder to see, but we'll talk about that in another video. If I can see the gift in me, if I believe that there is goodness in me, then I will almost automatically believe that there's goodness in you, right? Or goodness in this teenager, even though I might not be able to see it. So I've got to first accept my blessing, and then or be working on that, right? It doesn't have to be all wrapped up. First of all, we never have it all wrapped up. We're always a work in progress. We are always a work in progress. So give yourself permission to just even be thinking about it, right? So the first thing might be just be thinking about it, accepting myself, accepting what's good in me. And then the second piece is, believe it or not, a lot easier, and that's to accept our brokenness. to accept the parts of ourselves, our idiosyncrasies, our patterns, our behaviors, the way we interact with other people that we may not like, that they may not like, right? To accept these things in ourselves, to accept that we've had perhaps unhealthy coping mechanisms in our life, unhealthy, maybe even sinful ways of dealing with our problems, with our hurts, with our life, that we've hurt other people. And just to begin doing that opens up doors that you cannot necessarily see, or you will not necessarily be able to articulate, right? But opens up doors for you to connect with young people, and it will open up doors for you to connect with not just teens, but with anyone. So the first one is to know that acceptance does not mean condoning. I'm not giving them permission to do the unhealthy things or the things that I may not like that they're doing, right? And the second one is to accept ourself, right? To accept ourself. And then thirdly is our body language, right? We convey radical acceptance by the way we just comport ourselves, the way we hold ourselves, right? Our facial expression. So if a teen walks in and they're coming into us, or whether, you know, if we get it, whether you're on stage, right, speaking, whether you're in a small group, whether you're having a one-on-one, whether it's your child and you're sitting around the kitchen table, and I know that it's a lot more difficult for parents, and we're going to talk about that. There'll be a whole special video on how to make these principles and practices, these steps, which are sequential, how to make them more practical for parents. But I'll just kind of give a little bit right away. The same principles apply for parents, but there are three things that are going on for parents that are different when it's not your child. One is the intensity of the emotion. Just the real intensity of the emotion that's going on because it's your kid. Secondly, parents, we lack objectivity when it comes to our kids. So we're emotionally invested. And the third thing is that we have an obligation and a responsibility to protect our kid, to protect our child, to protect our teenager, right? So it makes it more difficult for parents because the intensity is ratcheted up. But the solution, the same steps that we use to connect for anyone else is also true for parents, right? Is also true for parents. But so it's to watch our body language, right? And so often when we're having trouble accepting a behavior, we might look at a teen like this. Or, I've seen so many folks, and I've done it, you know, and I'm so grateful that my former students, my former clients, their parents have held that up for me. And look, it didn't always feel good, but have held up for me some days when I was having a bad day and say, you know, you just looked like you were through with me. My wife, thank God, has held that up for me. She's like, the way that you look at me sometimes makes me feel like you're disgusted in me. And right, that's my brokenness, right? But I'm not disgusted with her. I'm really disgusted with myself, which is why we have to do this, right? We got to go back to point number 2, right? But our body language, right? How we look at other people, right? How we're comported. You know, if they come in and we're, you know, like this, right? Or if we're not open and communicating openness. I'm like, I'm a tall guy, so a lot of my clients, not really tall, but you know, some of my clients, you know, are, especially the younger teens, you know, I will stoop down when I go into the waiting room, you know, and make sure that I shake their hand. And I'm smiling, right? I'm smiling. Right? And they go, well, Roy, now you're just being inauthentic. Nope. And we're going to have a whole section on that, right? There'll be a whole video on how to be ourselves and why that's critical, why it's critical to be ourselves. But I can smile, right, in order to convey acceptance, because I really do accept that teen regardless of what they're doing. So just our body language, if we're closed off, if we're slumped over, you know, and the way that we look at them. So that's key. So accepting body language is to smile. Mother Teresa made that a mandate for the missionaries of charity. In fact, on one video I watched, she said, if you cannot smile, missionaries of charity are carriers of God's joy. So smile. The poor, she said, have enough misery of their own. They don't need yours, right? And so to smile, right? And a lot of us, especially, and look, I'm guilty, right? But a lot of us who are ministry or in education, right, and we work with young people, and I know parents too, we just, you know, we walk around like this, or we get so serious about what it is that we're doing, and our face is like this. And just imagine, you know, if a teen, and we're trying to influence them to be more spiritual or to take their faith more seriously, they're looking at us going, oh no, if your faith is what's doing, if church is what's doing that to you, if learning math is what's doing that to you, then I don't want any part of it, right? So our body language. And then the final piece is our words and our vocal tonality, like our tone of voice, right? How do we speak to them? Is there an edge in our voice? Are we edgy? Are we saying, yeah, I accept you, right? And I know that's a bit exaggerated, but there's nothing about that tone of voice that I just used that's accepting, right? Whereas a teen might come in and they might say something, and again, I know you're in a whole bunch of different settings with this, but a teen might come in and they may say something that blows my mind, that scares the absolute hell out of me. They may be lethal as they sit there on my couch, right? I may know in the back of my mind that this kid needs to spend the night in a hospital somewhere tonight, but when they're going through their pain, right, I'm sitting there going, yeah. And I'm not faking that, right? And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, but right at this moment they're hurting, right? At this moment they're hurting, and so I'm conveying, yeah, just real acceptance, you know, and I'm speaking in a warm voice, a soft tone of voice, an accepting tone of voice. Or a kid might be, you know, and I'll just take it back to my own son, right? And I don't do this perfectly by any means, right? Contact Mindy Petitfils and she can tell you how imperfect I am. Thank God she reminds me and she gives me the opportunity to remind her. So when it's our own kid, like we might be frustrated. This might be the 100th time or the 1000th time that they've done this, and we're just so far, we've told them to do something and they're not doing it. We are having to punish them, right? And we don't feel like punishing our child, but we've got to, or giving them consequences, and we're just so fed up with it, right? That's when our body language and our vocal tone conveys, I don't accept you. And what teens get from that, when this is off and when this is off, is that this isn't a consequence for my behavior. Love is on the line. The relationship is at risk, right? When we convey to them this deep disapproval, which is not to say, look, which is not to say we don't convey to them at some point, yeah, I'm disappointed. I wish you had made a better choice, but I love you, regardless of what you do. But all behavior, everything we do in life, good or bad, has consequences. And so we're going to need to talk about what the consequences of this is. And when you're doing it for the 100th time, right, it's exhausting, but the same principles still apply. So 4 pieces, the 4 big pieces of practicing or conveying radical acceptance in order to connect with teens is to know that acceptance does not mean condoning, that we first have to accept ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all 3, right? We have to watch our body language and our facial expressions and watch the words that we use and the tone of voice that we speak in. So those are the 4. There's plenty more coming up. Thank you. If you're still watching this video, right, we're 13, 14 minutes in and you're still watching. I hope it was helpful. Would love to hear any comments, any criticisms, anything that you don't feel like it works. I'm open to changing it. The manuscript's not done. It's almost done. But I really would value your input. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week on a new video, which is step number 2, which is to be understanding, to convey understanding. And we're going to talk about how that happens. Have a great week. Bye.